You're not worth 75 more per week. Just like that. 22 years of loyalty. And that's what I got. By 11:30 that same morning, TechFlow Systems had lost $89 million and 230 clients. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Thomas Garrett. I'm 47, and I just learned an expensive lesson about knowing your worth. Well, expensive for them anyway. Tuesday morning started like any other. Coffee at 6:30, in the office by 7:15, checking overnight system logs before most people even thought about breakfast. Same routine I'd followed for 22 years at TechFlow Systems. Started there when we had 50 people crammed into a converted warehouse in Austin. Watched it grow into a 2,000-employee corporation with offices in 3 states. I'd been putting off this conversation for months, hell, maybe years. The company just announced record profits, $340 million last quarter. James Norwood, our CEO, bought his 3rd vacation home last month. Meanwhile, I'm still making $78,000 a year. Same number for 4 years running, while everything else got more expensive. My son's college tuition went up 12% this year alone. So I scheduled a meeting with Austin Brooks. Yeah, that Austin Brooks. James Norwood's nephew. 29 years old, MBA from some fancy school. Been at the company exactly 18 months. Never worked anywhere else. Never troubleshot a critical system failure. Never had to explain to angry clients why their data was temporarily unavailable. The conference room smelled like Austin's expensive cologne when I walked in at 8:30. He barely looked up from his laptop. "Tom, what can I do for you?" I wanted to discuss my compensation. I've been here 22 years, and my last raise was 4 years ago. I'm requesting an increase of $75 per week. $75 per week. That's $3,900 a year, about what the company spends on Austin's monthly business lunches. Austin leaned back in his chair with that smirk I'd grown to hate. "Tom, I appreciate your dedication. I really do. But we need to be realistic about your value proposition here." Value proposition. This kid who needed help resetting his email password was talking about value propositions. You've been here a long time, but frankly, your skill set is becoming outdated. We're moving toward cloud-based solutions, agile methodologies. Your legacy thinking isn't really aligned with our strategic direction. Legacy thinking. 22 years of keeping their systems running was legacy thinking. That's when Ethan Walsh stuck his head in. Our VP of Operations, 31 years old, another MBA hotshot, with about as much hands-on technical experience as my neighbor's cat. "Everything okay in here?" "Tom's asking for a raise," Austin said, like I'd asked for his firstborn child. Ethan actually laughed. "A raise? Tom, buddy, you're not worth 75 more per week. We've got interns who understand our cloud infrastructure better than you do." There it was. After 22 years of being the guy who came in during Hurricane Harvey to keep the servers running while half the city was underwater. After training dozens of employees who went on to make twice my salary at other companies. After being the one person who could fix problems that left everyone else scratching their heads. Not worth $70 more per week. Besides, Austin added, we're looking at automating a lot of the processes you handle manually. Your role might be redundant in the next few months anyway. Redundant. The guy who built half their core systems was redundant. I sat there for maybe 10 seconds. Then I stood up, straightened my tie, and said, I understand. Thank you for your time. Austin looked surprised. Probably expected me to argue or beg or get emotional. But I'd learned something in 22 years of corporate life. Don't give them the satisfaction. I walked back to my desk and started cleaning out my personal items. Not making a scene, not slamming drawers. Just quietly packing my coffee mug, the photo of my son at his high school graduation, my backup reading glasses. Where are you going? Patricia Coleman from HR walked over. Pat was 52, one of the few people left who remembered the early days. She understood what I brought to the table, cleaning out my desk. Tom, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I looked at her and she got it. After 22 years, I was done. So I packed up my desk and left. What happened next? Well, Austin and Ethan were about to get an education about the difference between knowing how to use technology and actually understanding how it works. When you build a company's infrastructure from the ground up, you make certain decisions. You create certain dependencies. Over the years, I documented most of these through official channels. But there were always those quick fixes, those emergency patches, those will formalize this later solutions that somehow never got properly documented. I'd built custom fixes over the years, band-aids that needed changing every few days. Guess who was the only one who knew where they were? Take the authentication protocol I wrote in 2018 when we had that security breach. Buried deep in the system, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Every 72 hours, it needed a specific maintenance routine to prevent system conflicts. I'd been doing it automatically, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11:30 a.m. Then there was the backup validation script that ran Tuesday and Thursday. Sure, we had automated backups, but automated doesn't mean functional. My script actually verified the backup data integrity. Without it, those backups were just expensive digital paperweights and the client data synchronization process for our biggest accounts. Official documentation said it was fully automated, and it was, except for the part where legacy client data needed manual verification every few days to prevent corruption. Another one of those Tom just handles it tasks that never made it into the procedures manual. I wasn't planning anything vindictive. That's not who I am. But I also wasn't going to spend my last day creating detailed handover documents for people who just told me I wasn't worth a modest raise. Instead, I finished packing, sent a brief email to Pat confirming my immediate resignation, and walked out the door. No drama, no speeches, no burning bridges. Just a professional exit from a company that had forgotten what professionalism looked like. I was pulling out of the parking lot when my phone started buzzing. First call came at 11:32 a.m., exactly 2 minutes after my usual maintenance window for that authentication protocol. Austin Brooks. Tom, we're getting some weird error messages on the main system. Can you call me back? I let it go to voicemail. Second call, 11:35 a.m. Ethan Walsh this time. Tom, urgent issue with client data access. Need you to walk us through something. Also, went to voicemail. By 11:45, my phone was ringing non-stop. The system wasn't just throwing errors, it was starting a cascade failure. When that authentication protocol failed, it triggered security lockouts on client accounts. When the backup validation script didn't run, the automated system started overwriting corrupted data with more corrupted data. When the client synchronization process failed, it began corrupting the master database. I stopped at a coffee shop about 20 minutes from the office and finally answered my phone. James Norwood himself was calling. "Tom, thank God. We need you back here immediately. Something's wrong with the entire system." "Sorry, James, but I no longer work for TechFlow. As of this morning, I'm officially done with your company." "Tom, this isn't the time for games. I'm not playing games. Austin and Ethan made it very clear this morning that my skills are outdated and my role is redundant. I'm simply taking their advice and moving on." Silence on the other end. Then, "What exactly is happening to our system?" "Couldn't tell you. You'll need to consult with your agile, modern, cloud-based solution experts." I hung up and ordered another coffee. Figured I might be there a while. The calls kept coming. Austin, Ethan, various technical staff, even Pat from HR begging me to come back and just help them understand what's happening. Each time, I politely explained that I was no longer employed by TechFlow and couldn't provide technical support. Want to know what's funny? They brought in consultants, emergency contractors, even flew in specialists from their corporate partners. But here's something they didn't think about. You can't Google institutional knowledge. You can't hire it as a consultant for a few hours. It exists in the experience of people who've been there, who've built the systems, who understand not just how things work, but why they were built that way. By 1:30 p.m., according to the news alert on my phone, TechFlow Systems had issued a statement about temporary service disruptions affecting client access. By 3 p.m., it was a system-wide outage with expected resolution within 24 hours. Right. I drove home and spent the afternoon doing something I hadn't done in years. Absolutely nothing work-related. Sat on my back porch, drank a beer, watched my neighbor try to fix his lawnmower. Simple stuff. Peaceful. My phone kept buzzing with voicemails. Around 5 p.m., I finally listened to a few. Austin sounded panicked. Ethan was practically begging. James Norwood left 3 separate messages, each offering progressively more money for me to just come in and consult for a few hours. Thursday morning brought more bad news for TechFlow. The trade publications were reporting that major clients were jumping ship. Companies don't mess around when their data security is compromised. And when your systems are down for more than 48 hours, clients start looking for alternatives fast. The emergency contractors they'd hired were making things worse. Turns out, when you don't understand how custom systems were built, your attempts to fix them can cause more damage. One consultant accidentally wiped 3 months of archived client data trying to restore a backup that wasn't actually functional. While they were scrambling, my phone started ringing again, but not from TechFlow this time. "Tom, this is Rebecca Santos from DataCore Solutions. I know this might seem like odd timing, but we've been trying to recruit you for years. Given recent events, I thought maybe now might be a good time to talk." DataCore had been TechFlow's biggest competitor for the past decade. Rebecca was their head of talent acquisition, and she was right. They'd been trying to poach me since 2019. I'd always been loyal to TechFlow. Funny how loyalty works when it only goes one direction. "What did you have in mind? How about lunch tomorrow? I think you'll be interested in what we're prepared to offer." 2 more companies called that day. Word travels fast in the tech industry, especially when there's a very public example of what happens when you don't value experienced personnel. Friday morning's news was brutal for TechFlow. Stock price had dropped 34% since Tuesday. The system was still down. Emergency contractors were billing them $2,000 per hour, with no guarantee they could actually fix anything. And the client exodus was accelerating. I met Rebecca at a nice steakhouse downtown. She didn't waste time with small talk. Chief Technology Officer position, $155,000. Base salary plus equity options. Full benefits, 4 weeks vacation, and a team of people who actually respect experience. Double my TechFlow salary, plus equity, plus respect. When would you want me to start? Monday, if you're interested. I was interested. That afternoon, I called James Norwood personally. Professional courtesy. Tom, he said before I could even speak, I know we made some mistakes. Austin and Ethan were completely out of line. We'd like to bring you back. We're prepared to offer you a significant raise, maybe even a promotion, to senior management. I appreciate the offer, James, but I've already accepted another position. How much are they paying you? We'll match it. It's not about the money anymore, which was true. At some point, it becomes about respect, about being valued for what you bring to the table, about working with people who understand that experience isn't just years on a resume. It's problem solved, disasters averted, knowledge gained through actually doing the work. Tom, please. The board is breathing down my neck. The consultants can't figure out your systems. We need you back. My systems? James, according to Austin and Ethan, those are legacy systems that need to be replaced anyway. Sounds like this is the perfect opportunity for them to build something modern and agile. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Look, I continued, I'm sure your team of cloud-based solution experts will figure it out eventually. After all, they said interns understand your infrastructure better than I do. Tom, I start my new job Monday. Good luck with everything. I hung up and poured myself a drink. It had been quite a week. Monday morning at DataCore felt like stepping into a different world. Rebecca walked me around the office, introducing me to my new team. These weren't kids fresh out of college with attitudes. They were professionals who'd been doing this work for years and understood what experience actually meant. Tom built the infrastructure at TechFlow from the ground up, Rebecca told the team. We're lucky to have someone with his institutional knowledge. Institutional knowledge. At DataCore, that was a valuable asset. At TechFlow, it had been legacy thinking. My first week was mostly meetings and getting familiar with their systems. Professional, well-documented systems with proper backup procedures and clear maintenance protocols. Everything I'd tried to implement at TechFlow over the years, but never had the resources or management support to do properly. Meanwhile, TechFlow was making headlines for all the wrong reasons. By the end of my first week at DataCore, the trade publications were reporting that TechFlow had lost 230 major clients. Their stock had dropped another 15%. The emergency contractors had racked up $3.2 million in bills and still hadn't restored full functionality. Austin Brooks was no longer answering his phone. Word was he'd been restructured out of his position. Ethan Walsh had jumped ship to a startup that specialized in cryptocurrency solutions. Good luck with that. The real damage to TechFlow wasn't just the immediate system failure. It was the reputation hit. In the tech industry, reliability is everything. When prospective clients Google your company name, and the first results are articles about catastrophic system failures, it doesn't matter how good your sales pitch is. James Norwood tried calling me a few more times that second week. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemails. They got progressively more desperate. The board was threatening to remove him. The insurance company was fighting the claim. Clients were demanding penalty payments for breach of service agreements. The final tally, according to their quarterly report that came out 6 weeks later, was $89 million in direct losses, emergency contractor fees, penalty payments, legal costs, lost revenue from departed clients. But the real number was probably double that when you factored in the long-term damage to their reputation and market position. Here's what Austin and Ethan never understood. When you push out someone with 22 years of experience, you're not just losing one employee. You're losing 2 decades of problem-solving knowledge, relationship building, and understanding of how all the pieces fit together. Every system I'd built had dependencies. Not because I was trying to make myself indispensable, but because that's how complex systems work in the real world. You build on what exists. You create workarounds for limitations. You develop solutions that integrate with legacy infrastructure. Over time, these connections become invisible to everyone except the person who built them. The consultants TechFlow hired were competent enough, but they were looking at individual components without understanding the ecosystem. It's like trying to fix a car engine when you don't know how the transmission connects to the electrical system. You might get the engine running, but good luck driving anywhere. 3 months after I left, TechFlow announced they were exploring strategic partnerships. Corporate speak for, "We're looking for someone to buy us before we go completely under." 6 months later, they were acquired by a larger corporation for about 40% of their previous market value. The acquisition made the business news. I read the article over coffee one Saturday morning. James Norwood was quoted as saying he was excited about new opportunities and looked forward to spending more time with family. Translation: the board gave him a choice between resigning or being fired. Austin Brooks ended up at a mid-level consulting firm, making about half what he'd made at TechFlow. Ethan Walsh's cryptocurrency startup folded within 8 months when their main product turned out to be solving a problem that didn't actually exist. As for me, I was doing better than I'd done in years. DataCore appreciated what I brought to the table. My team respected my experience instead of treating it like a liability. And the company understood that when you hire someone with 22 years of experience, you're not just getting technical skills. You're getting judgment, perspective, and the kind of problem-solving ability that only comes from having seen it all before. My son's college tuition was covered without me having to stress about it. I had a real retirement plan for the first time in years, and I worked with people who valued institutional knowledge instead of dismissing it as outdated thinking. The funny thing is, I never intended any of this to happen. I wasn't plotting revenge or planning to sabotage anything. I just stopped doing the job they told me I wasn't worth being paid to do. Sometimes the best revenge is simply stepping back and letting people experience the natural consequences of their decisions. Austin and Ethan wanted modern, agile solutions without the burden of legacy thinking. They got exactly what they asked for: a clean slate with no institutional knowledge to slow them down. Problem was, they forgot that institutional knowledge isn't just historical baggage. It's the accumulated wisdom that prevents you from making expensive mistakes. When you throw that away because it seems outdated, you often end up learning those same lessons the hard way. And learning them the hard way, as TechFlow discovered, can be very expensive indeed. The market has a way of correcting these kinds of mistakes. Companies that don't value experience eventually pay the price for that decision. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes years. In TechFlow's case, it took about 52 minutes. 2 years later, I'm sitting in my new office at DataCore, looking out at downtown Austin. Corner office, nice view. Team of 12 experienced engineers who actually listen when I talk. Funny how things work out. My phone buzzed. Email from LinkedIn. Someone wanted to connect. Patricia Coleman, formerly of TechFlow Systems. I accepted and sent her a quick message asking how she was doing. Her response came back within minutes. She'd landed at a healthcare tech company about 6 months after TechFlow got bought out. Better pay, better benefits, better management. Best thing that ever happened to me, she wrote. Getting laid off in the acquisition was a blessing. That's how most of the TechFlow story ended. People scattered to the wind, mostly landing in better situations. Turns out, when a company publicly demonstrates that it doesn't value its people, those people become very attractive to competitors who do. The whole TechFlow mess became something of a cautionary tale in the Austin tech scene. I've been asked to speak at a couple of industry events about the importance of institutional knowledge and how to avoid brain drain. Never thought I'd be giving speeches, but apparently my story resonates with people. The talk I gave last month was to a group of startup CEOs and VPs. Young crowd, mostly guys in their 30s who'd raised venture capital and were scaling quickly. Same demographic as Austin and Ethan, basically. How many of you have employees over 45? I asked the room of about 80 people. Maybe 20 hands went up. How many of you think experience is less valuable than fresh thinking? About half the room raised their hands. Okay, let me tell you a story about a company that thought the same thing. After the talk, several people came up to ask questions. One guy, probably around Austin's age, said something that stuck with me. I never thought about the cost of losing institutional knowledge. We've been pushing out older employees to make room for cheaper, younger talent. How's that working out for you? Well, we keep having the same problems over and over. Stuff that should be simple takes forever because no one remembers how we solved it before. That's the thing about experience. It's not just about knowing how to do something. It's about remembering all the ways not to do it. Every mistake you've made, every problem you've solved, every shortcut that seemed like a good idea but turned into a disaster 6 months later. That's the knowledge you're throwing away when you decide someone is too expensive or set in their ways. I still run into former TechFlow people around town. Most are doing well. The company's collapse forced everyone to reevaluate what they wanted, and a lot of people discovered they'd been settling for less than they deserved. Mike Patterson, who used to run server maintenance, is now making 40% more at a financial services company. Sarah Kim from the database team started her own consulting firm and is booked solid. Even some of the younger employees who survived the initial purge eventually left when they realized the company culture was toxic. The building where TechFlow used to be housed is now a WeWork space. I drove by it last week and almost didn't recognize the place. New paint, new signs, completely different energy. The old TechFlow logo is gone, replaced by motivational quotes about disrupting industries and thinking outside the box. I wonder if any of the new tenants know about the company that used to operate there, or what happened when management decided that 22 years of experience wasn't worth $75 more per week. James Norwood, last I heard, was doing some kind of executive consulting, helping other companies avoid the mistakes he made, presumably. I hope he's learned something from the experience, though I have my doubts. Some people just don't get it. The acquisition company that bought TechFlow's assets basically gutted everything and started over. They kept maybe 30% of the original workforce, rebuilt the entire technical infrastructure, and rebranded the whole operation. Took them 18 months and millions of dollars to get back to where TechFlow had been on that Tuesday morning when I walked out. My son graduated college last spring with a computer science degree. He's working for a tech company in Seattle, making more in his first job than I made after 15 years at TechFlow. When I told him the whole story, he just shook his head. "Dad, you should have left years earlier." He's probably right. Loyalty is a two-way street, and I'd been traveling it alone for too long. These days, when younger colleagues ask me for career advice, I tell them the same thing. Know your worth, and don't be afraid to find an employer who recognizes it. Companies that don't value experience will eventually pay the price for that decision, but you don't have to stick around to watch it happen. The market is pretty efficient at correcting these kinds of mistakes. Companies that treat people well tend to succeed. Companies that don't tend to fail, or at least struggle more than they need to. TechFlow learned that lesson the expensive way. As for me, I'm 49 now, making more money than I ever thought possible, working with people who respect what I bring to the table. My retirement is on track. My son is launched and successful, and I sleep better at night, knowing I'm valued for my contributions. Sometimes, the best revenge really is just living well. And getting paid what you're actually worth doesn't hurt either. The moral of the story isn't complicated. If you're going to tell someone they're not worth a modest raise, you'd better make sure you can actually function without them. Because in today's competitive market, that person might just decide you're not worth their loyalty anymore. 22 years of experience walks out the door just as easily as it walks in. The difference is, it's a lot harder to replace than most people think, especially when you've just spent $89 million learning that lesson.